I asked our guest, Andy Behrens, to pound the table for someone. Andy, who you pounded the table for?
I'm going to literally pound the table. Sorry about that. I feel like everything's, some spillage happened. Anyway, literally pounding the table to bring to your attention the fact that Lamar Jackson has the highest ceiling of any quarterback in our game, and it's like people don't care. I just saw him go like number 6 overall at the position. This is a year where we're drafting quarterbacks really high too, like Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, sometimes going round 2, round 3. Lamar as like the 5th or 6th quarterback off the board is insane. His best season in the NFL just happened a couple years ago. It was the highest per game scoring season in fantasy history, right? So like his ceiling, which is established, is the best in the game. He's my number 3 quarterback right now, and I feel like a little bit of a coward for that. Everything about the Ravens offseason suggests that it is going to be an entirely Lamar-centric team, right? They've built up this passing game. They have a coordinator now who has like actually directed the NFL's number 1 passing offense. So we're probably going to get a slightly different Lamar, but this could be like a 4,000 passing yard, 1,000 rushing yard Lamar Jackson, which has obviously never happened in NFL history. He's a good bet to be the first to do it. And I can't imagine letting him slip outside the first 3 or 4 quarterbacks.
I love it. I love it. Worth spilling something over is Lamar Jackson this year. You heard it from Andy. Go get you some Lamar Jackson. Now let's get to the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Most Accurate Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Niles. With me is my phenomenal co-host, Jen Akins. Jen, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. I almost just actually spilled as well because the intro used to be a lot longer, and I'm drinking, and all of a sudden we're here again. So,
Gotta be on your toes, Jen. Gotta be on your toes.
I don't know. Maybe did you cut it down, or has it been this whole season and I just haven't noticed? I don't know.
Look, our producer is off this week, so I'm flying by the seat of my pants, Jen. I'm clicking
You're
things.
Doing a great job so far.
I don't know what's happening.
You're doing a great job. No, I'm well. I'm good, man. I love this time of year. I love summer. It's a little. I'd say it's chill in our department, but it's really not. There's never a chill. But yeah, no, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm trying to amp myself up to write an article about Skyy Moore this week. We'll see how that goes. But outside of that, I'm doing good. Had a good day with the family yesterday. So here ready to air my fantasy grievances. That's my favorite thing to do. This is our 3rd annual Fantasy Festivus episode to air those grievances. We're joined with the wonderful Andy Behrens today. You can find Andy on Twitter at Andy Behrens and check out his fantastic work at Yahoo Sports. He's still the president of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, and you can listen to him as a regular presence on the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast, which is a great podcast to listen to. Andy, thank you so much for joining us again and taking your time. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I can't seem to hand off that presidency. Do either one of you want it? I'll give it up right now. I'll give up the mantle right now.
I'm not the enforcer
Jen,
that you are, Andy.
You said you've got nothing to do.
Well, we can talk about this later, but I think I'm good.
Before we get too far into our grievances, I got to ask you a few questions, Andy, based on stuff that I've seen you do or things that I've read by you. The first thing is, tell me about your Chicago Marathon podcast. I saw that dropped recently, and I'm just interested to hear about it, how it came about, and if you're enjoying doing it.
Yeah, so that was actually that was the first episode. I was guesting on the first episode of the CHGO Chicago Marathon podcast. Kevin Kaduk, who was at Yahoo for a long time and is now at CHGO, is running his first marathon. It's Chicago. I just ran my 12th, so I have a little bit of experience. Although I've screwed up at least 10 of them, including this one. I've hardly mastered it, but I do have some experience messing up marathons, so I can give people, I can tell people what I've done, and then they can assume that is what they should not do in their own marathon. So it was really fun talking to Kevin about it. I've run Chicago several times, and it's just the city's beautiful. The city's beautiful in the fall. The neighborhoods turn out like crazy. Like, it is just a wonderful urban experience. It is generally a great way to see a city. So I had fun with them. It was really nice.
I haven't done a marathon, but I love those urban setting runs. Like, I'll run 5-10 miles in that range, and I enjoy an urban run.
Yeah, man. Watching like the city's different neighborhoods come out to fully support, runners from the elites who are crazy to, sort of the back of the pack. hobbyist runners, right? Like it's just great. It's a really special day. And like New York's that way, obviously Boston is that way, and Chicago is very much that way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I enjoyed your presence on that episode. I like to think of myself as a runner, even though I don't run enough to call myself that. So
it's like the marathon is like the outer limit of what I am barely physically capable of doing. So that's just like a fun thing to challenge yourself with, or torture yourself with once or twice a year.
Or torture. That's fun. I love it. I have another question, and this one's more on the spectator fantasy sports side, which I enjoy. I have Ellie De La Cruz on my dynasty team, and I just want to know how excited.
So it's just a moment for you to brag. You just want
to. Yeah. How excited should I be? What's the future for this kid? I saw you wrote about him recently. So just how bullish are you on his future?
Well, yeah, we'd been writing about him like before the call up, and then you know he's one of the rare instances this season where like a call up deserves its own sort of blog post, right, on the fantasy side. Super exciting. Like Ellie De La Cruz has barely been in Major League Baseball. He's only been around for like 2 weeks. He is already at the absolute top of the leaderboard in terms of sprint speed recorded in a Major League game this season. It was like almost 31 feet per second, which I don't know. Every sport measures speed differently. Yeah. It's weird. But he's
can't
like
even
literally
when he runs. It's
yeah, he's literally the fastest guy in the game, and he's already like 95th percentile for max exit velocity. So like you know, he's the toolsiest player in the game. Basically, he's 21 years old. He's super fun. Really, really magnetic personality too. So and the crazy thing is, obviously, the Reds have been really hot since he came up, and since they've added like all this talent from their system. He might not be the best hitter in that system. Like Christian Encarnacion Strand is yet to come up. That guy's hitting 350 in the minors. He's like the best bad ball hitter we've seen since Vlad Guerrero. He's, you know, OPS over 1100. Like that's another guy you should have on your dynasty roster.
Incredible. Excited to see what the Reds are doing over there. I'm fun with that. Hello to SV Lou 77. Glad you had a successful 2022 season. Some of mine were successful, some of mine not so much. We'll get into that. And hello, Mr. Scapers. Thanks for joining us as always. One more question for you, Andy, before we get
what was that name? Mr. Scapers is a cat's name. That's not
Mr. Scampers. Yes, Mr. Scampers. It's a cat's name, and Mr. Scampers joins us regularly. One of our friends to the show. One more question before we get into our grievances. This one I gotta ask you, Chicago Bears, because every time you come on, I gotta ask about the Chicago Bears. That backfield is confusing from a fantasy perspective. I like everybody. I don't know what to do with it. How are you approaching the Bears backfield this offseason?
I mean, I got to be honest. I don't think it's confusing. I think it's a committee like most backfields. You know, I think that's what you should assume. Our problem is we go into every season looking at every team through this lens of like, okay, how can they get to one guy? But almost no teams are trying to get to one guy, and I don't think the Bears are in that group. Like I think I don't know who leads the team in carries this year. Probably Justin Fields, but it's going to be close with Khalil Herbert, right? And like Roshan is probably really good. Deontay Foreman is a pro. I don't know. I've never been as high on him as others have, but they obviously signed him with the intention of actually giving him a little bit of run. I do hear from the occasional person who just absolutely thinks that based on efficiency alone and you know, some of the supporting analytics, like Khalil Herbert should be a guy that you find 275 touches for. I get it. He does struggle in some really important like real life areas, right? He had some terrible moments in pass protection last year, and obviously Justin Fields needs all the help that he can get in that regard. So like that kind of stuff keeps Herbert off the field a little bit. Also, the team may just identify him, and this is most running backs, as somebody who is best utilized as a guy who doesn't reach 275 or 300 touches, right? Like I fully expect them to be a committee. Herbert's the one that I would most aggressively draft, but I don't think there's anybody here that you need to grab, even sort of in the running back dead zone. Like I think you can wait beyond the top 6 rounds to even think about a Bears running back.
Excellent. That makes sense to me. I'm hoping they at least get it down to 2, though, Andy. That's what I'm hoping for. Even if we're not doing 1. All right, let's get into our fantasy football grievances for the season. Let's start with our favorite team grievances. Nope, let's not do that. I read my show notes wrong. Let's start with our last season grievances. Going from last season, what went wrong? What are we not happy with? What can we do to air these grievances? Andy, let's start with you. What made you upset about last season?
Yeah, I think my biggest grievance actually coming out of last season is like, once again, tight ends who were not Travis Kelce just barely showed up, right? Like Kittle had some moments. Kittle was fine. Mark Andrews was fine for like, I don't know, 5-6 games at the start of the year. Kittle was great at the end of the year. Travis Kelce's dominance at this spot is at this point, it's just cartoonish, right? It's hilarious. Each of the last 7 seasons in both PPR and standard, he's been a top 2 fantasy tight end. He's usually been the number 1 tight end. His dominance over the field last year was just stupid. You know, he doubled up the production of all but like 4 or 5 tight ends. It's kind of outrageous at this point. And I obviously I don't blame him. I blame everybody else. It's you know, like it's also related. It's kind of a fake position, right? Like the tight ends that we draft in fantasy, all of them, even the ones who can block really well, even Kittle, like they all run routes on like 90% of snaps. They're receivers. Like the tight ends that we are drafting are receivers. I fully support the idea that we should just have sort of a generic receiving position so we don't have to pretend that guys like Travis Kelce, who's great, that Mark Andrews, who's always running routes, that these guys are like legitimate NFL, like, you know, inline tight ends. That's not the case. Like tight end is now a position that is really like 2 or 3 different positions in the NFL. And the guys that we draft in fantasy are for the most part, just slot receivers.
I remember, you know, some of the leagues that I joined in the late 80s and early 90s, I remember had that blended position. It was wide receiver / tight end that you could do. And I wonder if we would go back to that, because it definitely would change the dynamics, that we could stop talking about, you know, Chigagonkwu and players like that.
Yeah, you know, the thing is,
throw out Higbee. I was like, you're going to drop a Higbee.
I don't even like to mention Ty.
I know.
That's the thing.
I know.
The thing is, we would still take Kelce like in the second round because he'd be like the
Yep.
wide receiver 4, right? The wide receiver 5. I mean, his numbers are that ridiculous. So you're not, you know, you're just getting rid of a bunch of bad receivers is what you're doing if you blend it into wideouts.
So Andy, are you paying up for any of those secondary guys this year? Anyone catch your eye? The TJ Hawkinsons of the world, or anyone? Are you paying up, or are you waiting?
We'll talk a little bit later about a guy that I'm taking really late, but for the most part, like if I'm not getting Kelce in the first, and you need basically the right draft spot to do that, right? Like you've got to be drafting somewhere in that like 6 to 8 range. If I'm not getting Kelce in the first, I'll wait all day.
Okay, that makes it. Jen, are you still waiting all day?
Yes, you know I'm waiting all day.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pull the trigger on even the Andrews anymore. Andrews and Kittle have kind of burned me in the
waiting,
last couple of years.
And we said, I'm waiting past that middle set. I'm not doing the Higbee and the Komet and all the middle people. Nope, I'm waiting all the way.
It's total minefield.
Yeah.
I love it. Jen, how about you for last season? Your last season grievances.
So I'm going kind of low hanging fruit here, but I'm going with the Broncos offense in general, all of them, every single one of them. I had so much invested in Russell Wilson and some of the other guys, and you know, they all were awful. Honestly, the only one, so Greg Dulcich, right, a rookie tight end, which that never happens, is the only guy that even showed up. I mean, he was tight end 15, so you know, a fringe tight end 1, if you will, in half PPR points per game. But the rest of the guys, I mean, Wilson, you know, was QB 22. I mean, I guess whatever. You know, Jerry Jeudy was a wide receiver 3. Sutton was a wide receiver 4. You know, the best running back was, you know, Latavius Murray, who wasn't even supposed to be a Bronco. I mean, he was an RB3 at that. So it was ugly. The whole offense, they were dead last in points per game with 16.9 throughout the entire season. So it was just a train wreck. And unfortunately, I live in Denver, so I bought a little of the hype at that time and just invested way too much in Russell Wilson, because he was still kind of cheap, because he wasn't coming from Seattle. People were unsure, so he was cheap-ish. So I thought this is going to be great, tons of value, and it just sunk like half my teams. So that is it. Broncos as a whole for me.
I felt so good about my Dak Russ 2 quarterback leagues last year. I thought I was gaming the system. I was like, I've got this.
Yeah, I had Russ Brady in Scott Fishbowl on the turn, my first 2 picks, and I was like, this is great, and awful.
I have to say the Sean Payton Russell Wilson pairing is one of the wildest experiments that's happening in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm excited
this
to
year,
see. I mean, I'm not giving up. I mean, don't think I haven't taken Russ here and there in best ball. I will, but
like Peyton, on the one hand, Peyton has such a great track record with like way before Drew Brees and then after Drew Brees. He has a great track record with super sketchy quarterbacks, right? So like that's pretty interesting. But you also like the way he won for 2 decades in the NFL is exactly not what Russell Wilson does, and so it's just the strangest pairing in that regard.
yeah.
I might have a little Jarrett Stidham. I might just this
Yeah.
much
I do
Jarrett
too.
Stidham.
In
Yeah.
Superflex, I absolutely have
Yeah.
him in the end too.
Just a little bit. Just very curious about that. I'm kind of piggybacking off of what you said, Andy. The Chiefs disappointed me from a fantasy perspective because we have Patrick Mahomes was the league leader in passing yardage last season, wins the Super Bowl, phenomenal. But as we know, Travis Kelce is the wide receiver in that offense because McCole Hardman led the wide receiver room in half PPR points per game, and he was 34th in the league in that. If you want to go total half PPR fantasy points, Juju Smith-Schuster led the room 29th. He was the wide receiver 29. So this type of an offense that's so good that we're always looking for a receiver to step up and be the guy, those are the numbers we can expect as not even wide receiver 2 numbers. And I fell for the Skyy Moore preseason stuff. There was stuff on YouTube, stuff on Twitter every single day about, oh, look at how amazing he is. And he just barely sniffs the field. Kadarius Toney's exciting, but he's played like 19 games over the last 2 seasons. Now they go in, they've added Rashee Rice and Richie James. Like, I hate the Kansas City wide receiver room.
You told us at the top that you were about to write some Skyy Moore. I assume it's Skyy Moore hype, right? Like you can't quit him though, can you?
I got to figure this out. I got to figure out where I'm going with this because I started with Skyy Moore is bound for the season we all hoped for as a rookie. That's kind of my premise. But as I'm digging in, I'm like, I may not land there.
Isn't that funny when you talk yourself either in or out halfway through an article? I do it all the time. I'm like, even on this podcast, someone we get to later, I wrote them down and I'm like, wait, I just talked myself into them when I was like festivusing about this guy. And then I talked myself into it, but I'll still talk about him anyway.
I know.
I've learned over the years that you really have to like you have to find the data before you like write your lead before you actually get into the text of the story. You probably better check the data.
Set up your data first. Absolutely. I did that with Greg Dulcich recently. I was about to talk about how I'm not buying him and I don't know why people are interested. And then I looked at all the data and I'm like, oh no, he's the next breakout tight end. I like him. So yeah. Let's move on to favorite team grievances. I was so excited about this category. I tried to jump the gun on it. Andy, I know you're a Bears fan. There's optimism in Chicago right now, but what's a grievance that you have about the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, there is a fair amount of optimism. They've made some good moves along the offensive line, right? The defense is still pretty sketchy, but for fantasy purposes, we're all fine with that. I think like if you didn't see progress from Justin Fields last year, you weren't looking hard enough. But the Chase Claypool thing is just gonna hang over me. It's gonna hang over the franchise until he's out of here. Like a thing that I feel like we talk about every year is that, there's going to be sunshine around virtually every player in the offseason, in training camp, in the preseason. And you should really prick up your ears when there's bad news about a player and when there's like negative buzz about a player. And like Chase Claypool has just been the absolute king of negative buzz so far. Like, and we're not even in camp yet. And you're hearing like, on local sports radio, you're hearing whispers about Chase Claypool and his commitment and his awareness of the playbook and all kinds of nonsense that we should not be dealing with. He's obviously dealing with some sort of medley of injuries as well. And it's just I don't know that obviously it was a disastrous trade, a second round pick and a high second round pick for a player who really outside of, a touchdown driven rookie season has not really shown us a whole lot of positives in the NFL. You should have just let the Packers have him. I don't expect anything from him this year. He's one of the most aggravating players in fantasy because he's so athletically gifted. But I'm already frustrated by him and it's not even July.
Yeah, trade obviously looks awful. Is he going to win that big slot role at least? At least do that?
I mean they're a little bit pot committed, right? And they've got to figure out if they obviously found something in him that they fell for when they made the deal. So Yeah, probably. But that's really an indictment of the rest of the receiving core and not so much a reflection of anything good about Claypool.
Woo, bold. I like that. I like that. Jen, your favorite team, which is also my favorite team, grievances.
Yeah, I have two teams, and I already discussed the entire offense of the Broncos, so that we can put that off to the side. My other grievance for the Dolphins is not necessarily a fantasy at all. It's really just the frustration last year of how Tua's concussion situation was handled by not only the doctors on the Dolphins, but also the independent NFL consultant people. The guy, he had 3 suspected concussions last year. Let's just go over them real quick. So week 3 versus Buffalo, his head hits the turf in a hit by Matt Milano. He was removed from the game. He was very wobbly. They claimed back spasms. He re-entered the game. Obviously, that probably should not have happened, right? The very next week against the Bengals, it was a short week too. He starts. He got slammed to the ground, and he demonstrated that fencing response where his hands were all rigid, which was the one that was the super ugly one that everyone, So he was sidelined for 3 games. Comes back. Then in week 16 against the Packers, his head at the turf again before halftime. They did not even remove him from the game. And he threw 3 picks in the second half of the game. He obviously was not well. So that whole situation is ugly. You're talking about a young man's life, and it was, I hate to get serious and all that, but, it was just a bummer on the season. And, from a fantasy perspective, it's also, people that had him in rosters, and it was frustrating and all of that, because it's like, do I start him? Do I not start him? Is he going to go down and, after a hit? So I just feel like, hopefully this offseason, all the different teams, all 32 teams did things to improve, their departments on, not just concussion, but all kinds of injury and all the different protocols and all of that. So that was frustrating. But, supposedly Tua is healthy, ready to go, ready to continue on with his, his career. And let's hope that this season is a better one in that regard.
The language around Tua is always kind of nasty too. Like, I get tired of people talking about Tua. It's always, I don't know, always really I feel like he gets criticized a little extra. Not that he's a perfect player. There's obviously things to poke holes in his game and things, and of course we're concerned about the health. But I feel like people talk about him, I guess because Justin Herbert's been so good. I guess people just discuss Tua like he's been this colossal bust, and I don't necessarily think that's fair. So.
No, I agree. And he's had some great games, especially from a fantasy perspective. I did have him in one of those guillotines last year, and he was fantastic. I rode him for most of the time until, he went down for those 3 games and then all of that. But yeah.
I think if there was any thought that Tua was a colossal bust, last year should have put that to rest, right? Like when he was right, he was incredible. The Ravens game was incredible, and yeah, they have 2 of the best receivers in the game, but we rarely see quarterbacks have special seasons without having at least one like truly legitimate number 1 receiver. So he was fantastic when he was right last year. And the other, like to Jen's point, the way the NFL and the Dolphins just sort of insulted all of us with the treatment, the characterization of the first concussion, which was obviously a concussion in real time. Like, I don't know. That's so, I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen a lot of injuries covered up, and that was just like as flagrant as any about an issue that the NFL is supposed to be all over right now. Like, this is the new caring NFL that cares about brain injuries, and to see them just manipulate the sort of protocol last year was really obnoxious.
It was gross. It was gross. It's also very telling to me, not to get too serious here, but it's very telling to me that the Dolphins were heavily penalized for inappropriately talking to Tom Brady. But all the other accusations and problems that have come up with Miami, with the training staff, with Brian Flores, all that stuff, no, all that's fine. There's no penalties there or anything like that. So ethically, let's go a little lighter about the Dolphins. I'm just going to complain about the tight end position. I understand Mike Gesicki's not great, right? But he's still, like, he had 52 targets and 5 touchdowns last year. Like, he was a part of the offense. So we're really going to go into this offseason, and we're just going to say, you know what, Durham Smythe, that's our guy. 115 targets in 5 years. His blocking grades on PFF aren't good. I'm not sure what he does well, but the Dolphins have decided, you know what, we'll bring in like guys like Tyler Kroft, but Durham Smythe, you're our guy. I know it's not a featured position in Mike McDaniel's offense, but I feel like we can at least get a blocker if we're not going to get somebody that's going to be fantasy relevant. So I don't get it. I don't know why the Dolphins looked at that situation and said Smythe is our guy, but we need something else there.
I like that Mike McDaniel looked at that position and said, "Oh, this is a fake position. I don't need to fill it."
That's pretty much what happened.
I guess so. I guess Cedric Wilson is their tight end. I guess that's.
How about we
we'll
just
go.
throw to great receivers? I like
Yeah.
that he said that.
True. I do love me some Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle makes me very happy as a Dolphins fan. I might waddle like a penguin in front of my 6-year-old daughter when he scores a touchdown. It's very possible that I do that. So let's move on to a bonus. This is my mid-segment. It's a meta segment. It's a fool me twice segment, which Jen came up with the idea for, and I like that. This is someone we went to bat for a year ago that we're not going back. You did, like years ago. You
came up with okay.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
Huh? Okay, got it.
Jen's like, I didn't do this. What are you talking about? So this is someone we went to bat for last year, but we're not going back to the well on this year. So Andy, who's someone you were pounding the table for a year ago and you're not interested in this year?
Yeah, I just want you to forget for a moment that I said a lot of nice things about Lamar Jackson at the top of the show, and I can't do it again with Rashad Bateman. I'm not somebody who's generally like, oh, he's injury prone, because I feel like I've tracked all this stuff long enough to realize that in the NFL, virtually everyone is injury. It's an injury prone league, right? But serious foot injury followed by, like it's not entirely glowing news in the offseason either, right? He's getting pain shots. He's obviously still struggling with the recovery from the foot. I'm worried about that. I loved him coming out of school. And I still think that he's had some very nice moments in the NFL, but he obviously hasn't been able to sustain that over long periods. And if unless we just get a seamless training camp and we're not worried about the foot at all, and there are no negative reports about his health, and they're not managing him, like, you don't. One of my favorite things that my coworker Scott Pianowski frequently says is, like, you don't, in the NFL, you don't need to run to trouble, right? Because trouble will definitely find you. You're gonna have injuries on your fantasy team, so you don't need to draft a whole bunch of them. And if this is not a situation that's entirely resolved going into the season, he's not at the level of player where I'm like, oh, I'll take a flyer.
Are you buying Zay Flowers? Because right now all the negative stuff we're hearing about Rashad Bateman is out there, but we're hearing the opposite of Zay Flowers at this point.
Yeah, I wasn't as big a fan in the run up to the draft of Zay Flowers as many people were, but I'm also, like, this is terrible because I'm super bullish on Lamar generally, but I'm not, like, I'm not totally there with Odell Beckham. I'm probably more there with Zay Flowers than I am any other receiver on this team other than Mark Andrews, who, once again, is just purely a receiver. He's not really a tight end. It's a fake position. Yeah, this to me is like, Andrews is interesting. Zay Flowers is interesting. Odell is an awful lot of money, and there's not a great history of players who are coming through a couple of ACL injuries, right? So it was a nice flyer for a team that had to take one, and we'll see how it works out. He was great the last time we saw him on the field, but again, like, 2 ACL injuries is a lot. So just process of elimination, we arrive at Zay Flowers. I won't surprise me at all if he's the number 1 receiver on that team.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me at all. Rashad Bateman, I think I just accidentally draft him. I'm so used to doing it for the last 2 years. Like, gets in the 8th, 9th round, I'm just like, oh yeah, Bateman. And then I'm like, what am I doing? He's not going to play. I'm with you. Jen, how about you? What's somebody you're not going back to the well for?
Well, this is the guy I was talking about that I kind of talked myself into while I was writing down notes about why I was not drafting him. But it's Brandon Cooks. I mean, Brandon. I was all over Brandon Cooks last year. I had him probably on, I don't know, 80% of my teams, whether it was best ball, redraft, whatever. And it was a disaster. Now, granted, he was on the Texans and he was miserable, right? But he ended up wide receiver 42 in half PPR points per game. I think he ended up with 9.0 points per game. He only played 13 games. So once again, he is someone that has a lot of injuries. He's had a lot of concussions and other various things. But then I was looking at it and I'm like, well, Dallas, like, they always are looking for that second guy. He's there. I don't know. I mean, his ADP right now. So last year, his ADP was wide receiver 24. He was a 5th rounder, which was pretty pricey, but at the time I thought it was great. Now he's a 7th rounder. He's at wide receiver 43, which is about where he ended last year. So I guess he is affordable if you're looking there. So that's what I was saying. I kind of talked myself into him again, which is frustrating because I vowed. I'm like, no more Brandon Cooks. because I feel like he has all this potential every year on these various, scenarios. And you're like last year, you're like, no one else is going to get the ball in Houston. He's the guy. And then he wasn't the guy. And now here we are. He's in Dallas, which is, arguably a much better offense, but still, I don't know. So I guess it really isn't right for the segment because I kind of talk myself in a little bit because he is affordable. I mean, he's going as wide receiver 43. So it's like you're not investing a lot in the guy. And if he does, I don't know. But yeah.
If he has 1,000 yards, is this his 5th team that with which he'll have 1,000? I think it is, right? Like
New England,
Saints, the
Rams,
Patriots, the Rams, the Texans. Yeah, this is fun. I don't know what the record is for number of franchises with which you've had 1,000 yards, but we've got to be closing in on it here. That's crazy.
Yeah, so maybe I will draft him. I don't know, but not as much. Let's just say that much. Last year, I was all about him. I'm like, he is going to be a target monster, and he's going to do it all. And he did not do it all. So I will sprinkle him in some portfolios. I don't think I will draft him in a redraft, though, but I will have him in a little bit in best ball.
Yeah. I will say I don't want the lineup decision, so I'm kind of with you. I don't want to take him as my wide receiver 3 and then have to decide whether or not to start him each week. Right. So, Mr. Scampers, a lot of us faded DK and Lockett last year. We were all sad about fading that Seattle passing game based on how things worked out. So I understand that. That's a good one. Jay Prug, I don't know how you lost. You must have had Brandon Cooks and Rashad Bateman as your primary receivers if you had Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and only won 5 games. So sorry about your rough season. Hopefully next season will be better for you. Thanks for listening in. My guy that I'm not going back to the well on is Darnell Mooney. I drafted him a lot last year. I was excited about him coming off 1,000-yard season, had that breakout year. There wasn't a whole lot of other targets in Chicago at the beginning of the season. So I thought Mooney would be great. I thought Fields would progress at least a little bit as a passer, which he definitely did, but I thought Mooney would benefit in that way. Now he's only an 11th rounder right now, so you can get him cheap, but a lot like Cooks, I don't want the lineup decision. I don't want to think about him anymore. I want him to go do his late night talk show over the Mooney, which exists in my mind.
Wait, I thought it was Moon over Miami or Moon.
No, it's over the Mooney. Over the Mooney with Darnell Mooney. It's a late night romance advice talk show. It's what I imagine. It exists in my head and it's wonderful. So it's a hit. Only had 493 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. Disappointing. Chicago dead last in pass attempts last year. I don't think that's going to get any better. And now they got DJ Moore. So I just don't see the targets there for Mooney, unfortunately, and I'm hoping he lands in a new uniform somewhere else because I still think he's a talented kid. Andy, do you think he's a talented guy as a Bears fan, or am I too bullish on him as a talent?
No, I think he's really talented. I think he's and not that the Bears tried to sell him as such, but he's certainly miscast as a number 1 receiver. That was a terrible position to put him in, right? I don't think he's that guy. I think most NFL teams have a player as talented as Darnell Mooney. It was the Bears just had an absolutely trash receiving core last year. There wasn't like he should not be any team's number 1.
That's fair.
I think he could get really interesting if he's attached to the right quarterback in a dynamic passing offense. I don't think the Bears are going to have that. A lot of the reporting around the Bears last week was already the just offseason stuff, but so take it with a grain of salt. But things only looked good for that offense when it was Fields to Moore, and things looked really, really sketchy when it was Fields to anyone else, just like in simple 7-on-7 stuff. So I think Moore is going to work out. I think Moore is by far the best receiver that Fields has had to throw to since Ohio State. So I like that connection is going to be great. I don't know if it's an offense that's going to support. In fact, I doubt that it's an offense that's going to support a second viable fantasy option at receiver. Like they literally only attempted 22 passes per game last year. It was an unserious passing offense. So that has to be like, I don't know, 50% more, 75% more to even consider this, a viable passing game to invest in outside of Fields.
Yeah, it's I like my 90s references, so I'm gonna call him he should be the Darnay Scott. A team needs to bring him in. Be that Darnay Scott. My 90s.
That's a crazy name that you mentioned. I couldn't stop drafting Darnay Scott. I loved Darnay Scott. I was happy to let other people take Pickens. Give me Darnay Scott in the 8th round. Yeah. Oh,
and he'd win you a week. 3 weeks a year, he'd win the week for you.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. All right. So Darnell Mooney, not on your fantasy team, definitely on your fictional night radio list. So post free agency trade season grievances. Andy, what's a grievance about now that we know free agency has happened, trades have happened, the rosters are set? What's your grievance in there?
This isn't even really a grievance. I just wanted to talk about it. I just find it so hilarious that the Jets are just trying to run back the Packers, 2021 offense, 2020 offense.
It's amazing.
We don't see this very often, right? Like, this isn't just Aaron Rodgers that relocated to New York. This is Aaron bringing Randall Cobb with him, bringing Alan Lazard with him, bringing Hackett with him, who was just as disgraced as one can be last year, right? Like, it is a wild relocation of Green Bay assets into New York, and we don't like. Aaron Rodgers is probably still really good. Obviously, he had injury issues that he was dealing with last year, but there's a non-trivial chance that we are very much on the downside for Aaron Rodgers right now. We've surely already seen his best seasons. It's possible that washed is a strong word that I'm not going to use, but it's possible that he's already sort of at a sub Derek Carr level, and it's not going to get any better. I mean, I think he's a genius level quarterback, but man, like, age catches up to everyone, and I can't believe they've done it. And like, Randall Cobb was just the cherry on top of that whole thing. I have no idea why that had to happen.
I always forget that Randall Cobb is still in the league, and then I'm like, oh, hey, look, Randall Cobb, good for him.
Those couple weeks where Aaron Rodgers was just showing up like in the first row of every like NBA playoff game and NHL game in New York that was one of my favorite times in recent sports history. He just looked so uncomfortable and lost and didn't know anybody's name and like, who am I sitting next to today? And oh man, good times.
I'd like to imagine that's Aaron Rodgers in most settings, just kind of confused about where he is and how he got there. It's I love it. We'll see how that works out. I can sure see that being a wonderful experience for the Jets. I could also see it just like Denver did last year. Jen, are you buying Garrett Wilson high? He's going like second, early third round now. Are you buying him with Aaron Rodgers there?
I'm not. I tend to go more with like Amon-Ra St. Brown or Waddle, in that when I'm there in that, when those guys, yeah. I mean, I think I may have taken him a time or two. But given the choice, I think there's other guys I'd rather see there. Because like Andy said, we just don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we've seen so many of these quarterbacks, Tom Brady excluded, right? Because he's a robot.
He's always the exclusion. Yeah.
Right. But like, we all witnessed Peyton Manning, as great as he is, his last year, he was just kind of trotting out there. And, there was a legitimate decline that we saw happening. And I feel like, I don't want to waste that much draft capital on someone if that ends up being the case with Wilson, because he is going very high.
I like it, but it does, not to throw the old cliche out there, it does seem like he's being drafted at his ceiling. It does seem there. So let's go to your grievance for post-free agency and trade, Jen.
I'm super bummed that the Bills did not grab a good wide receiver too for Josh Allen. I mean, here we are wasting peak Josh Allen years. And they just, there were plenty of receivers. I remember a show we did. I think we were talking about fits that we wanted there. And, I feel like Adam Thielen would have been a nice fit, reunite him and Diggs, get him in there. There were players that they could have brought in, now we're rolling with Gabe Davis again. We got Deontay Hardy. We got Trent Sherfield. I mean, come on, you got one of the best quarterbacks to probably ever play the game there, and they're and they have a great coach. I mean, they have a great team, but you're just kind of wasting peak Allen with this bevy of randoms after Stephon Diggs.
Hey, there could only be one winner of the Chase Claypool sweepstakes. Sorry. Sorry, Buffalo.
Andy, is Dalton Kincaid that wide receiver too that we're all hoping for in Buffalo?
I'm gonna get to Dalton Kincaid later. I think he's fine. He's one of a couple of players at this fake position that they have. Obviously, not Knox being the other. I mostly agree with Jen here that it's and some of it is a reflection of like the free agency class of receiver. There just wasn't a lot out there, right? Yeah. Which is why the Bears made that aggressive, reckless move for Chase Claypool. I mean, it was just a really rough class. Could the Bills have possibly gotten in on, they couldn't have gotten in on DJ Moore. He's like the only other guy who was getting traded this offseason. So I will say though, in a draft that had so many, not necessarily like high level can't miss wide receiver prospects, but so many good like slot receiver prospects. It's a little bit wild that they didn't come away with one.
Especially when they lose Isaiah McKenzie, who was supposed to be that slot guy for them, that didn't pan out. You'd think they would have grabbed one of those guys. I'm with you completely. I hate that the Titans didn't add anything to the offense. They added an offensive lineman. They lost Robert Woods. I know Robert Woods wasn't much last year. Like, that was a bad season for Robert Woods. He still led the team in receptions, targets, and receiving yards. Like, this team has Treylon Burks, who we all like, but we're expecting a big jump from Treylon Burks. And then they've got Chig Okonkwo, who also we like, but we're expecting these big jumps out of these players for the offense to come up from being one of the worst offenses in the league. They were 30th in yards. They were 28th in points last year. Ryan Tannehill is basically a lame duck quarterback. Like, he's basically, the ballots are in, and he's not the party's nomination for the next round. That's what's happening with Ryan Tannehill. He's got one foot out the door. Like, this is going to be Derrick Henry running the ball 200 times in the first 6 weeks before his feet give out. I hate this offense, and I'm angry that they didn't add anything to it except an offensive line.
I mean, the thing is, they can win the division. Like, the division is right there, right? Like, to not add anything significant off, and they, of course, they might still add Nuke. That could happen, and that would blow up the projection for Treylon and Chig and all that. Like, so they could still add, but it's kind of outrageous when you just look at the fact that, like, there's, Jacksonville's a good team, an ascending team, but nothing's guaranteed. Like, they can absolutely win that division, and the offense is just so meh.
Yeah, I like Jacksonville, but yeah, we're not banking on them, right? Like, it wouldn't shock anybody if Jacksonville came to earth and Tennessee was able to take that. It baffles me completely. So let's go to the post NFL draft grievances. We haven't really talked too much about the rookies. We mentioned a little Dalton Kincaid, but outside of that, post NFL draft grievances. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I'm still just and I have no real allegiance to the Houston Texans, but I cannot believe that they traded all that they traded for Will Anderson. That is as in the moment as bad a trade as I think I've ever seen. And we just mentioned Nuke Hopkins, and that was a pretty bad trade too. But so they trade picks 12 and 33 in this last draft. So 33, practically a first rounder.
Yep.
They then trade their first and third in 2024, and they sort of traded their way into a position where, unless Will Anderson is like not just a Hall of Famer, but like an inner circle best to ever do it Hall of Famer, I don't see how they could possibly walk away thinking that, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, that they won that trade. And then when you look at what they could have done, just based on what would have fallen to them, you could have paired CJ Stroud with collegiate teammate JSN, right? And then you're still a bad team next year, and maybe you're drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. next year, right? Like, and that seems awesome to me. I can't believe that wouldn't be better. Like, I hope Will Anderson, I've heard him interviewed many times. Seems like a lovely person. like I find him easy to root for. I can't believe they made that trade. There are very few players in NFL history that are worth all that Houston gave up for him. So hope it works out. Can't imagine it will.
It could be a top 5 pick next year. They could be trading a top 5 pick next year.
Literally could be Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah. Like a true impact player in what seems like it's going to be a great draft class.
And 33 could have grabbed a receiver there too. Like, the best thing you could do is to take a really good receiver with your. I'm with you completely, Andy. Jen, how about you? Post draft grievances.
Well, like Andy said, I have no allegiance to this team, the Falcons. I just find it frustrating that they didn't add a quarterback. I understand they took Bijan Robinson. I get it. What?
My dynasty league rosters are very upset with you for this. I'm just saying.
I was not aware you were a big Desmond Ridder fan. I'm sorry.
I'm not. I just happen to have a lot of him.
I just feel like, and I understand that they went for Bijan, and I get it, but at the same time, you've got so much young talent. You've got Pitts, you've got Drake London, and now you have Robinson, and you have a quarterback that's just not able to carry all of that. And he may prove me wrong, and he may be fantastic. And I will be eating my words next year, Festivus. I will be complaining that I wasn't high enough on Desmond Ridder, but I really don't think that's going to happen. And it bums me out for the Falcons. And, I lived in Georgia for a time, and I have plenty of friends that are Falcon fans, and I'm just bummed out at just kind of what they're doing with that team. It's like rebuild after rebuild after rebuild. And it's like, when does that, So I'm just bummed for them that we have another season with Desmond Ridder, or not another, but we're going in.
You know what? One of the things that people are going to forget about this offseason, except maybe some Falcons fans, is that there was a moment there when Lamar Jackson was reportedly on the trade block, and Atlanta publicly got out of that. Atlanta was no, there were reports that the Atlanta Falcons weren't interested in Lamar Jackson. Whatever you think of Desmond Ridder, Lamar's much better. Lamar's in a much different class of quarterback and would have been perfect for what they want to do for that offensive identity. It is crazy to me that they were never seriously in on Lamar.
All those teams that came out were like, no Lamar, immediately. What do you gain from releasing that? Even if internally you think that way, what do you gain from doing that? It just makes you look silly because Lamar's incredible.
Sometimes you want to you want to stick by your own guys, right? I get that. Maybe it's just misdirection, and there was no, the team didn't want to say anything that could be perceived as negative about Ridder. But even Desmond Ridder had to be like, "Come on, go get Lamar. What are we doing?"
Absolutely. So for me, it's mostly I loved Ken Walker. I was really excited about Ken Walker. I still actually like him. I still think he's going to play a lot of snaps. I think he's a home run hitter. So, ADP in the 5th round, I still think that's a good value for Ken Walker. But pre-draft, he was a first-round pick, and we were all excited about Ken Walker, and he was so good at the end of last season. And I was buying it. Pete Carroll running backs, I love it. And then Charbonnet in the 2nd round. I 2 running backs in the 2nd round in subsequent years. He's got that well-rounded profile. I'm sure he's a lovely person, but he just made a situation that wasn't Merck into Merck. And now I'm unhappy because I've got another murky running back situation. So both those guys ADP are okay. We've talked about that in previous weeks, Jen, but I just hate that they took this bona fide 1st-round running back off the board for me.
Well, as I've told you, Brandon, once they all get hurt, and then it'll be Kenny McIntosh, and then once Walker goes down and Charbonnet goes down, Seattle running backs get hurt. They all do, and we're going to end up with DJ Dallas and Kenny McIntosh backfield. You'll see by week 9.
To Walker's credit, he got hurt last year, and that guy played through it in the most important fantasy weeks. So that tip of the cap to him. I needed it. You guys probably needed it. That was awesome.
And he did those great things where you'd see the first half statistics. He'd have 12 carries, 8 yards, and then he'd have a 70-yard touchdown. And you'd be like, oh, great. I love this guy.
Yeah.
All right, let's go current fantasy draft grievances. We're running up on time. I don't want to keep you late, so we'll breeze through these last 2 categories I've got for you, Andy. Current fantasy draft grievances, anyone personal experiences. I'm talking draft slots or snipes, anything that's bugging you about current drafts that you're going through.
Yeah, no, I tried to come into this offseason being the Bijan Robinson hot take guy. I legitimately think he can be the number 1 running back in fantasy football next year. I don't I assume other people have that same feeling, but I'm almost willing to draft him there. It's not going to surprise me at all if he's the number 1 overall pick next year, and I can't get him to save my life. I haven't done any super important drafts yet, right? Anything that I'm just gonna the leagues that I really obsess over. But every mock I sign up for, we go through this magazine mock season, and they let you sign up for your draft pick, and I'm like, I'm gonna take the 4th pick. I'll get Bijan there, and I'll be able to write about him, and that'll be awesome. And then somebody takes him 3rd. Somebody is beating me to Bijan all of the time. I think he's great. I think he's one of the best running back prospects I've ever seen, and he landed in a place that can't wait to feed him. So it's I don't need to talk people into Bijan Robinson. I just think I'm super annoyed that I haven't got him yet.
It happens in the 4-for-4 one you did for us. I think you signed up for 4 and he went at 3.
Yes. Yeah, that is exactly. Yeah. I signed up for 4 or 5. I'm like, oh man, I got something great to write about here. And I think I'd maybe written a sentence or 2. Right. And then of course somebody takes him 3.
People try to out Bijan people. Yeah, no, I'm a notorious rookie running back fan. I always enjoy me some rookie running backs. So it's very unfair that no one will let you have Bijan. Jen, how about you?
Well, my grievance is more just draft slot. It's just the bad, the algorithm, underdog for me. I've done a ton of drafts, whether it's in the puppies or the Best Ball Mania, all of them. for some reason, I'm like spot 9 through 11, 9 through 12. I can't get those top slots. And it's frustrating because I feel like not just the first round, like I'm fine with whatever, but I just can't get anyone I want, because what happens is if I say I want to go early, early quarterback, it's like I'm not going to reach for Josh Allen, on the turn or Mahomes. And I can't get hurt. I can't get any of the top quarterbacks unless I reach for them. I'm not going to do that. And I just keep getting screwed out of the running. I don't know. It's just a weird, I think 9 through 12, it's like, I figured it out and I've figured out kind of my rhythm, but there's a lot of guys I want, I just can't get. And, Underdog needs to kind of mix up their situation so I can get a better slot. It's like 10, 11. I don't know how the algorithm works. I know it's just random, whatever it is, but they always spew me right there into that spot, and it's annoying. That's it. My grievance.
I feel like it's personal. I feel like you need to do some bribing. That's what I think needs to happen. I keep drafting in the 7 to 9 area, right? So I have like a lot of Austin Eckler and Travis Kelce, and occasionally if I want to go like a little bold and counter, I'll take CD Lamb in there or something like that. But because you know how
bold, you love CD Lamb. You'll take 1-1 if you could.
I mean, taking him ahead of ADP, you know what I mean? Because he's going top of the second round. So sure. If I take him there, everyone's always a little bit, oh, you reached. But I want Jamar Chase. I want a power Bengals stack. I want a powerful Bengals offense. I've picked first a couple times, but it was early on, and so I just took Jefferson. And both times I've picked second, Jamar Chase has gone first. And I don't understand why those are the leagues that I've popped in and gotten second. But usually, like you, I'm picking 7th to 9th, kind of in that area. And I just want one roster where I can take Chase and I can take Burrow. And then,
you can even get Higgins if you're up there. But I can't get any of those guys either because of where I am.
I just want one.
Can't get Higgins. Yeah,
just want one. I can't get any Jamar Chase. It's very disappointing. All right, let's go ADPs that don't make sense. Let's move on to ADPs that don't make sense, and then we'll close out. Andy, who's somebody that you just can't believe where they're going?
I open this with a pound the table, and I'm gonna pound the table on this one too. I cannot believe that Dalton Kincaid is going ahead of Sam Laporta. It's outrageous. It offends me. It is an abomination. Yeah, okay. I'm an Iowa guy, and I'm partial to Iowa tight ends. I will admit that. Sam Laporta's situation is so good. We don't find this very often among rookies. Again, it's a fake position, so take it with a grain of salt. But like he lands in Detroit, where obviously there's no Hawkinson there anymore. They threw something like 12 touchdown passes to the tight end position last year. None of them are any good. Sam Laporta is a really good player. He is an incredible after the catch player. That guy in back-to-back seasons at Iowa had over 650 receiving yards, which doesn't seem like a lot, but if you really knew that offense, that's like 2,400 yards in simply an average college offense, right? Like he's going to be so good. There's a non-trivial chance that he finishes as a top 5 fantasy tight end as a rookie. I think he's fantastic. I think he's way underdrafted.
Top 5. I love that. To be fair to you, Iowa tight end.
It's a junk position. So it's Travis Kelce and almost everybody else. So
true.
Saying a tight end is going to be top 5 is what is that?
To be fair to you, Iowa is tight end university. So it is fair to be bullish on Iowa tight ends. That's interesting. The other thing I got to agree with you. Amon-Ra St. Brown is great there, but there's nobody there who can go up and catch a fade in the end zone. Like there's nobody that can do that. That's something Laporta can do. Absolutely. So yeah. I'm with you there. And there's all sorts of targets in Buffalo. I'm with you. Jen, how about you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to argue. I know that Iowa is tight end U, but I would like to argue that right now Georgia has, pretty good tight end still on the roster, and Darnell Washington in Pittsburgh coming from there this year. But anyway, I digress. My ADP guy Christian Watson. Like I don't understand why he's in the 4th round. I don't understand why he's wide receiver 20. I mean, we don't know what we have in Jordan Love, first of all. We don't know what is going to happen there with that offense. And then there was actually an article that came out from the Athletics beat writer, the Green Bay guy, Matt Schneidman. He thinks Romeo Doubs is going to lead Green Bay in receptions after watching, camps and stuff. He's not even thinking of Watson as that wide receiver 1, and he's still being drafted in the 4th round. So no thank you on Watson for me.
We don't know what Jordan Love's going to be. I mean,
he could be great or he could stink. I mean, we have no clue.
And are you buying anyone in that Green Bay passing game?
Also, Jaden Reed's really good, right? Like they drafted a really, really good rookie who would have looked great on a lot of teams. So it's easy to believe in Watson's athletic talent. I mean, he's kind of the Chase Claypool type in that regard, right? He's big, he's super fast, he can jump out of the building. His worst moments were really bad last year, and some of his best moments were really just Aaron Rodgers creations, right? And people taking bad angles on him that they're probably not going to take this year. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Reed in particular outperformed him this. I like that. Some of that is just a reflection of my opinion of Reed, but yeah, I definitely think that we are drafting Watson at something pretty close to the top of his range of outcomes.
Yeah, I'm with you. Give me all the Jaden Reed. That's the dynasty player in me who loves me some
Yeah.
Jaden Reed. So I don't understand why Kyle Pitts is going so high. He's going in the 6th round. He's going as the tight end 5 right now. I get that we love him as a prospect, but even if you take away the injury aspect, like he was 20th in tight end half PPR points per game last year. So nothing changed in Atlanta. Did Arthur Smith retire? Did they sign Patrick Mahomes and I didn't realize that? You know what I mean? Jen talked about Desmond Ridder there. No, what they did, they brought in an all-world running back to double down on the idea that we're going to run the ball constantly, and that's all they're going to do. And Matt Collins isn't nothing. Matt Collins is a guy you can
I like
count on in
Matt
the red zone.
Collins,
Yeah,
you know?
right? So there's more, there's less targets. We're expecting Drake London to take that step. Probably still going to be near the bottom of the league in pass attempts. Like, I love Kyle Pitts too, but why is he going as the tight end 5? I'm out. I'm completely out on Kyle Pitts as the tight end 5.
Once again, they don't even pretend he's a tight end. Like,
Right?
they don't use him as a tight end. They're not even pretending he's a tight end. It is so ridiculous that is even a distinct position in fantasy. It's outrageous. I should have banged the table for that.
I was gonna say that we should have done the entire podcast about this. We could
Just
have.
fake position, yeah.
Fake
That's what I want to do. I always say the barren wasteland that is the tight end position in articles. Now I'm just going to call it the fake position per
Yeah.
Andy
It's
Barron.
a totally fake position. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will mercifully let you go and enjoy the rest of your day, Andy. Thank you so much again for joining us. Listeners, make sure you follow Andy on Twitter at Andy Barons. Check out all his fantastic work at Yahoo Sports. Andy, any final thoughts or plugs before you go?
No, it's such a pleasure to be on with you guys. I love doing this show every year. It's a great concept, and it's good catching up with you.
Awesome. Thanks again, Andy. Jen, thank you. Always a pleasure. Listeners, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Jen Akins and at 2 Guys Brandon. Thanks so much for checking us out, and have a good day.